Hey everybody, welcome back to the San Diego Gundam podcast. And we're going to be taking a look at something a little bit different today. We're going to take a look at the Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway trailer that dropped January 19th of this year. Now, both me and Walter have checked this out already, and there's a lot of really cool stuff to look at this trailer. I think, um, first off, the animation is just on point. The music
Yeah.
is fantastic. But Walter, what are your thoughts on this guy?
Um, I mean, first off, I'm getting that almost like unicorn vibe from it in a
Right.
way.
Yeah. The hyper realism and just like the attention to like all the moving frames in
Hmm.
this movie, it makes it look like it's a very smooth continuation from the Unicorn and the narrative franchises, which I'm really enjoying. You can see that basically on the first frame. I think it's like second five, when you're just looking at the car driving on the freeway. You see this a lot in just like all of the frames um, that are in this trailer. It's just amazing,
Hmm.
right? A lot of attention to detail, really great shading, lots like your eye just moves everywhere. There's not like a single point where like the animation's amazing and then like everything else is just kind of bleh. It's just
Yeah.
everything looks like it could be a literal wallpaper.
Yeah. It's very well done. I mean, even if you look at certain parts of the actual video, you can see details that may not have stood out in other Gundam series. They've got this intricacy in some of the details that's really good.
Right. Yeah. So I think what's really crazy about this though is I think for a lot of hardcore Gundam fans, we all know the story of Hathaway's Flash. And we know how tragically it ends for the protagonist. Without spoiling it for a lot of people, we just know that, Gundam as a space opera it tends to be really, really sad for a lot of people.
Hmm.
But what's interesting is that there have been lots of deviations between Sunrise's production and whatever the source material is. So we can go as far back as, Char's Counterattack. There are two different variations, actually probably three different variations of this one story. And we even got that with Unicorn with Bandashi.
Hmm.
So we have a more fleshed out version of it. We have the anime version of it, but this is an interesting case where it's not that the anime and all that is kind of coming out first, but it was actually being adapted from source material. So we know what the source material is, but they're intentionally not calling it the source material. Now, most people recognize this as being Hathaway's Flash, but we actually just don't even see that portion. It's just called Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway. So there is, a thought in my mind that this show or this movie or this iteration might not end up as tragically as the original Hathaway's Flash might. So, I mean, it's something to think about.
Yeah, I think if we look at how they played Char's counterattack compared to the manga that was released for it, and what happened to Hathaway in that, and what could happen with this movie, I think we are looking at something that will be totally different. It will pay homage to the source material, but it's probably going to be its own story outside of what that story was.
Right. So I hope this is not too much of a spoiler for people who are tuning in, but the way that I actually interpreted the story of Hathaway's Flash, I didn't actually see too many interactions with the Cassie or with the Penelope. There's maybe like two skirmishes that I thought that were really
Mhm.
noteworthy. Um, but that flies in the face of what Gundam really is, and it's basically this machine to sell toys.
Mhm.
So if you looked at the Unicorn Gundam was was very prevalent throughout the entire series. And the same thing with the narrative. The narrative was really like up and center, throughout the entire series. You could name like four major fight scenes that it took part in.
Hmm.
And even the Fenix, right? The Fenix was always constantly there. But with Hathaway's Flash, it's very interesting because it's not so much a drama between robots fighting. It's a drama of the philosophy of what it means to overturn a system,
Yeah.
overturn the Federation. And so it's a lot of interpersonal interactions, and it's a lot of interactions of how we know what Hathaway's relationship is to the government in general. And so it is a very different take from Bandai's strategy to market, like, a lot of these toys. You can try to say that maybe they're marketing towards an older audience who is already familiar with these designs because it's prevalent in lots of different sources of media. You see it everywhere in video games, you hear about it all the time in, like, message boards and stuff like that. But I still feel like in order to fully milk this design, they won't just end it with just this one movie. I feel like even though it hasn't been released yet or announced yet, they might do some sort of part 2 or part 3 in order to really milk the story for all it's got.
Yeah. It
Unless they see that, product sales are already kind of through the roof, but I don't imagine Hathaway's Flash to be that popular of a source material.
No, it was already a very short lived series. It was a short lived light novel.
Mhm.
And you're right that it didn't have it was more focused on the human interaction of things than the spectacle of mobile suit battles. It was showing that you could do more on the ground that you could do in a robot as a person in a way.
Mhm. Right. Right. No, I definitely see that. And
So
so,
if they're going to use this to, I don't, I'm not entirely sure if they're going to use this to drive sales, but they may be trying to introduce a more entertainment value to their story than anything else.
mm. So I also find this really interesting, not because of when it was released, but actually, yeah. So most Gundam fans already know that the source material exists, right?
Hmm.
And most of us already knew that was coming out because of all the announcements from last year.
Hmm.
But being American citizens and, going and seeing the Capitol riots that happened on July 6th,
Hmm.
it's interesting to see the relationship between what's happening here in the United States with the message that's essentially being told here in the story, and
Hmm.
seeing kind of the parallels with our modern day life.
Hmm.
Now, normally when you see something like this kind of happening, for example, uh, I forgot. Um, yeah. So for people who don't know about this and the idea of the Strike Freedom that came out in Gundam Seed Destiny, so the Strike Freedom Gundam was originally supposed to be called the Super Freedom, because we had the Freedom and another Freedom Gundam.
Yeah.
But because of this super free movement that was kind of like a really big fiasco in Japan, I think it was basically like a cult.
Yeah.
Um, a really dangerous cult. They decided to not call it the Super Freedom on the off chance that people would look it up and think that the Gundam was somehow associated with
Right.
this dangerous cult. And so they changed that. So because of how big the Capitol riots were, and I'm sure that's pretty well known throughout the world about all this stuff that's kind of going on and the insurrections and stuff like that, that with with Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway's narrative essentially being the same as those Capitol riots, I'm wondering if they're going to do any augmentations to the original script in order to adjust for the sensitivities for people in the West or in democratic countries. Because we all know that Japan has a very particular relationship with the United States,
Hmm.
trying to, keep the peace. They look up to the United States. They don't want to anger the United States in any kind of way, shape, or form. But in the same point, Gundam has always been the type of show to really talk about the idea or concepts of conflict or war in our
Yeah.
present day. So while it would be kind of interesting to see them change it, I'm actually hoping that they don't change it. That way,
Yeah.
this show will be something as a talking and act as a talking point for these kinds of conversations.
And I don't think they'll change it either. The Japan, and like you said, Japan has a close tie to America, but they're they are still willing to present a story um, in a way that, even if it is conceived that way by a certain set of viewers, it is not meant to be that way. And even with recent events, I think that this would be a very good stepping stone to getting people to talk more about how we could overcome some of these things that we see nowadays, and open further dialogue with how we could do better.
Right. Because this is the absolute like tipping point for the history of the Federation.
Hmm.
Um and for all of these like negative biases and all of the chaos that's kind of ensued. In the same way, that's literally what we're kind of seeing here in the United States. It's the tipping point of all these emotions to a
Yeah.
point where words don't mean anything. It has to come to super radicalized action, and it would be interesting to see how they actually kind of do the end scene, um, because I'm sure a lot of these fans who are more right leaning, or there definitely are those types of fans here in the Gundam community, just because we have those imageries of a different time,
Yeah.
with Xenon and fascism and all that kind of stuff. To see what the message from Bandai, the owner of this property, is really trying to say about all of this.
Yeah.
So, um, but that I think this was gonna be a pretty amazing show to just watch. I don't think that I will be probably buying like any of the suits, to be honest. I probably won't be buying a Penelope. I won't be buying a PC. I won't be buying a Messer. I probably won't be buying uh any of the grunt suits or anything like that, unless something like really surprises me. But I think it'll be really fun to see what new products come out because of this movie, and what kind of hype will come out because of this movie.
Yeah. I mean, I've already got the Penelope. I just need the Cassia. I've already got the Messer, so we already know
Yeah,
where I'm going with my purchasing stories.
yeah,
Um,
those are pretty big suits, man.
yeah, they are. But I'm definitely excited to see what they do with this story. Um, Knowing that
Right.
the way that the show canon has gone so far, I want to see how they portray this movie even more now. Um, just to see the final, like, kind of, not to say nail in the coffin for the UC or Federation, but to see how it fully plays out in this, bringing it up to where we get to the the later parts of it.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think that would be kind of interesting too, because Gundam traditionally has gone through this like reboot,
Hmm.
right? Like, so you had all the old UC stuff, and then you had Char's counterattack, and then just ended, and then you had stuff that happened in like Victory and in Turn A. And
Hmm.
so when you looked at Gundam in that kind of way, it was more of like a cyclical thing. Like, oh, war is bad, it happens
Hmm.
all the time, it's blah blah blah. It became very impersonal. But then because of all these like smaller stories that kind of happen towards the end of the UC timeline, where it's really
Hmm.
painting the Federation in a really bad light, it's really
Yep.
showing the slow and gradual deterioration and distrust that's kind of happening. I think it does provide, even though this show is not very realistic, it does show a very realistic progression of how attitudes are slowly changing and shifting
Yeah.
towards stuff like F91, where for some reason things are just not working out the way it's supposed to.
Hmm.
Government's kind of really crappy, and it's really in the hands of like small militias, and then you see it devolve eventually into things like Victory Gundam or F91 or not F91, like Crossbone Gundam, like what we're
Hmm.
kind of talking about, where the Federation really has no part. It's
Yep.
basically just a third party entity that's self funded that's really protecting the peace of the solar system at that point.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think that I'm really excited for all this post UC stuff. It's gonna be crazy seeing something like Crossbone just animated like this. We already had a Crossbone anime at some point in time,
Oh yeah, that
but
would be amazing.
yeah. But now that I'm kind of looking at this, it's kind of interesting to see so many scenes of the messer. I think there's
Hmm.
literally 3 scenes now that I'm counting of just the messer. Um, but there's a lot of really interesting dynamic shots too. Especially the scene with Hathaway holding the gun,
Hmm.
and him running into the elevator, or I don't know if it's an elevator or like a hallway, but you have the movement of the character actually moving forward, and then you don't have a panoramic move, but you have a sideways upward panoramic move.
Yeah.
It's
Th-
really
th-
it's
it's very
really showcasing.
cinematic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really showcasing, like, the animation quality of, like, Sunrise with all of this. Really excited for it a lot. We're just really, really, really excited. But yeah, I think that was the end of the trailer for me. Like, I think that's about everything I really wanted to talk about. I'm really excited. I don't know if it'll ever be in theaters, but if it is, I'm sure it'll be a treat to see on the big screen.
I have a feeling it will be. I mean, even with all that's going on now, they're still doing theatrical releases over here. And
Okay.
I think it will get, if Demon Slayer's anything to prove, um, they are willing to put Japanese movies or Japanese anime movies over here for us. So I'm thinking that Bandai, Sunrise, they will definitely release this in America if they're watching the trend with what happened for Demon Slayer.
Right. No, I definitely see that. But, all right. I think that about wraps up this video. So hopefully everybody will get a chance to see it. We hope that you are all staying safe and taking care of yourselves. We hope to see you guys next week. And until then, please check out our Facebook page. You can check out our Discord. You can follow the conversations down there. Or if not, we hope that you tune in to our other various methods of distribution for this podcast. So see you guys later.
See you later.